I'm not really one to be down in the dumps about nutrition or dogmatic. I want to empower people. I want people to know that they have options, they have tools that they can use. All right, so this episode is all about what to do about that age as women, that perimenopausal, menopausal age for women. This could be late 30s for some, it could be early 40s. It can range a little bit, but this is a message of empowerment. My name is Allie Virtue. I am a functional medicine nutritionist and your host for the PreDiet Podcast. What the heck am I trying to do with this podcast? I'm trying to teach you the lessons I wish people knew sooner, before they had to hire a nutrition coach. So I guess I'm trying to put myself out of business. But this is the information that I wish people knew sooner, before they felt the need to start another diet on Monday. I just want to be a little proactive, help people out, help people feel better, increase your energy, feel great, feel superhuman, stuff like that. One more thing before we get started. Make sure that you are following on social media, Allie, ALI.Parkside Nutrition on Instagram. You can also find me on YouTube. And most of all, you should really be signed up for the Free Shit Friday email list. And you can find that at parksidenutrition.com/subscribe. And I will give you free shit directly to your inbox every Friday. What can you expect in that email? Because you're like, Allie, I don't want another email. Well, I'll tell you exactly what to expect. And it's a whole lot of free shit. So number one, you're going to get a recommended recipe, something that I think is really helpful for my clients or I might have suggested already that week. And the second thing you're going to get is an incredibly valuable tool, resource, free download, example meal plan, new podcast, new YouTube video, free training, something incredibly valuable that is 100% free. So that's huge. Third thing you're going to get is a question to ponder. Because yes, we might be trying to make physical changes, but we also have to work on the mental side of things and the mindset and how we think about these things. So you'll get those three things delivered to your email every single Friday. So make sure you're signed up for the Free Shit Friday email list. All right, now we can get into the good stuff. All right, so this episode is all about understanding and what to do about that age as women, that perimenopausal, menopausal age for women. This could be late 30s for some, it could be early 40s. It can range a little bit, but this is a message of empowerment. If you've listened to any other episodes, you know that I'm not really one to be down in the dumps about nutrition or dogmatic, or I want to empower people. I want people to know that they have options, they have tools that they can use. So if you are in that age group, to be honest, most of my clients are in that age group. I don't work with people usually, I will, but most of my clients are definitely over 30, usually in their 40s and above, up to 80s. So I will share a little bit of some case study notes as far as like the clients I've worked with before, what they've struggled with, what's worked for them, what hasn't worked for them, and the whole kind of approach. But this is definitely a message of hope. Like, you're not broken just because we're going through that specific age or time in life. You're not broken. The basics still apply. This is not a free pass to be like, well, exercise didn't work, so I'm just not going to do it. We're not doing that. We're not jumping on that train. Please, no. I just want that to be the place that we start, because I think a lot of people kind of throw the baby out with the bathwater if their first attempt doesn't work or their 70th attempt doesn't work. Like, there's still things that we can use. First of all, I want to reiterate the nutrition foundations for this life stage. And we do need to have the fundamentals still be a part of the picture. And with that fundamentals, I really want to emphasize the importance of protein, fiber, hydration, balancing our blood sugar. I feel like balancing our blood sugar is something that we have to be extra conscious of. That probably, if you've never had blood sugar issues before, you might think, well, my blood sugar is good, I don't need to pay attention to that anymore. Maybe not. And this is honestly where lab work really is very helpful, because it's really hard to be objective with ourselves. It's just the fact of being a human. So when we have that blood work, I myself put myself in that category. I think I'm a nutritionist. I exercise. I eat pretty well. Blah, 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 blah. I should have pristine blood work. And I have in the past, but then I've also had trends that are going in the wrong direction. And it could be mad about that, but I could also use it as information to change my trajectory now before it becomes a problem. And that is definitely a so helpful thing to do, because I think especially on social media, you get hit with a lot of products, a lot of things like, do you have high cortisol? Do you have this? Let's find out. Let's find out exactly what my lab work is saying before I just, impulse or emotionally buy something, buy some supplement off the internet that says will help with this thing that I might have, but I might not have. And some of those things can be quite expensive. So I'll try to keep on track here and not have too many tangents. But let's go back to protein. So as we age, and when we're talking about this stage of life, estrogen can decline. And estrogen does a really good job in earlier in life about building muscle, keeping our muscle mass. And our muscle mass is our kind of metabolic or longevity organ, if you want to think about it like that, because the more muscle mass I have on my frame, the more expensive my body is to run. Expensive in a good way means I need energy, I need protein to fuel me to maintain my weight in a healthy way. So if my muscle mass greatly decreases, I don't cost as much. So that means if I'm eating the same, my muscle mass goes down, I'm going to gain fat from that. So it's very, very important to keep our protein up. This also helps with some cravings, some sugar cravings that could pop up with this stage of life as well. So this is really going to help regulate our appetite. It's going to help me maintain my muscle mass that I already have, and hopefully build some more if we're open to that. But fiber is another thing we really want to take into consideration. And a lot of people will say like, oh, I take a fiber supplement, I'm checking that box, or I poop every day, Allie, my poops are great. I don't need to, worry about getting more fiber. Fiber is really another longevity nutrient that we really need to pay attention to. Colon cancer rates are rising. It also, even outside of that conversation, fiber feeds our gut bacteria, and we know our gut bacteria, our microbiome, is tied to so many aspects of health. So we not only need enough fiber, we need different types of fiber that's feeding that diversity in our gut. And so all of those aspects of our health, which is a lot, are also improving. We're improving our gut health consistently. I don't know of too many ways to like very quickly improve our gut health. Sometimes it's a long journey, but definitely worthwhile one because again, it correlates to so many other aspects and factors as far as our health. So we do always need to keep our gut health in mind, and having variety and getting enough fiber is a really important piece of that. And honestly, probably one of those two, getting enough protein, getting enough fiber, and fiber that's well tolerated by our body. Sometimes that depends on the person a little bit. They got to find the sources that work best for them. But those two things are probably the most under-consumed things I see as far as new clients coming in. They're not getting enough of those typically. Hydration. Hydration's got to be a part of the conversation. Me personally, I'm not great at drinking water, but I can't say that it's not important. If I'm dehydrated, I'm probably going to be reaching for some more food. That food might not be the best option. So having good hydration status is also very important to regulating my appetite as well, in addition to a whole host of other bodily functions. Blood sugar balance. This is something that we should really pay more attention to as we get older because sometimes this starts to become a problem and we can't ever really say like, oh, well, I've never had blood sugar issues in the past, so I won't anymore. Or it doesn't run in my family, or I've never had cholesterol issues, so I don't need to pay attention to that or don't need to worry about this or that. Always be checking in with that blood work so you know objectively what your body is saying, how it's running, and then you can make very educated choices on which habits you go after first instead of being like, well, I'll just start with this list of 50 things that are generally healthy. No, let's get specific. Let's look at lab work. Let's have that a part of the picture. We still need to be eating mostly whole foods over ultra processed foods. That really doesn't change. Even if you've tried dieting for weight loss during this stage of life and it hasn't been terribly successful for you, that's not really a free excuse to be like, oh, I'm just going to go eat fast food. That we know that's not helpful. So I see this a lot when people are talking about like, well, how do I stay motivated to keep doing this stuff? It's a super common question and a common struggle. How do I keep motivated to keep going to the gym, to keep eating vegetables, to keep eating my protein when I'm not seeing any weight loss progress or progress towards my specific goals? Newsflash, like we still got to do that stuff. We still got to do that stuff. I consider that stuff like paying our bills. Like we got to, right? My financial goal might be to be a millionaire or to save X number of dollars. And just because I'm frustrated that I'm not saving enough money or hitting that goal doesn't mean I get to like just not pay my mortgage. Like it's not a thing. It's not a path to success, right? So I consider those things like taking out the trash. It's the consequences of not taking out the trash are not good. We know that. Like my house is going to get dirty, it's going to smell. I don't want that. So I need to take the trash out, right? So even if we're not seeing significant change or progress or glamorous things from those actions, like those things are pretty key to just being a healthy human. So we kind of got to do them. The degree to which we do them might change. Maybe we up the exercise, decrease the exercise, whatever we need to do to see your goals happen. But those things still need to be a part of the routine, kind of forever. We also want to look at micronutrient diversity through our diet as well. So that's one thing that I really like to do when I'm looking at a client's food logs is I use the Chronometer app and website, and I can see because they have a pretty good database. We use this app when I was in grad school because we were measuring the amount of nutrition, so micronutrients, that's vitamins and minerals in our diet. And when we were creating therapeutic diets for people, we needed to check like how much of those certain vitamins, certain minerals were in the diets and recipes that we were recommending to clients and patients. So it does have a pretty robust database as far as what actual nutrition is in your food. And so I don't get super in the weeds with this with clients, but if I see that, XYZ vitamin or mineral is chronically low and they might have X, health condition, and I'm like, oh, okay, well, with that health condition, like these nutrients are specifically very important. I'm going to keep an extra eye on that. And usually that just turns into for the client, I'm going to recommend like, hey, let's have seafood more often. Let's have fish 3 times a week. Hey, can we get some Brazil nuts in the diet, whatever that food kind of correlates with. So I can just make those suggestions and always educate why of like, I'm not just suggesting this because, I like seafood. I'm suggesting this because this helps this health condition or this would support this bodily function, etc. Because I do believe if you know why you're doing something, you are more likely to do it. I personally don't like taking supplements. I think my B vitamins just smell awful when I open the jar, but I know that they help my lab work and they help for my health goals. So I'm tied to that outcome. So I'm more likely to suck it up and take my supplements. So let's talk about what changes when we get to that midlife as far as like our nutritional needs. So number one, we need our protein to increase. We need it to increase. I want to see at least 30 grams, preferably more than that, 30 to 40 grams of protein per meal. So we are supporting our lean muscle mass, and we are also supporting our satiety, which is how full and satisfied we feel. So we need to have protein a part of our dietary plan, preferably every single meal. And that amount, 30 to 40 grams of protein per meal, is also going to help send the signal of like, hey, body, I need you to hang on to that muscle mass. And hopefully, if we're pairing this with sufficient calories and weight training or resistance training, the body's going to put on muscle. That is fantastic. We want more muscle. We want as much muscle as we possibly, within reason, obviously. But luckily, putting on muscle is fairly difficult. So nobody usually puts on too much by accident. You will not get bulky unless you are trying very, very hard. Very, very, very hard. So don't worry about that. But that amount specifically really helps with muscle retention and getting multiple doses of that. That's honestly why I prefer to have clients, especially of this age group, to have 3 meals a day because we are sending that signal to the body 3 times a day, sometimes 4, that I need you to put on muscle mass. I need you to keep your muscle mass because if we go long periods of fasting, which fasting can have its own benefits, and we can talk about that some other time, but if we go long periods of fasting, the body's going to pull from the resources it has, right? So that's fat tissue or muscle tissue. That's what it has options to break down to feed you, to feed those metabolic processes, all the things to provide energy for the body. So if we go for a really long period of time, yeah, you'll pull from fat stores, but if we are in a significant calorie deficit, it will pull from muscle as well. So I really just have that in our head of like 3 meals a day is you can lose weight, you can gain weight, you can do whatever, accomplish your goals, your health goals, having 3 meals a day. I would love to see that, to be honest, in more people and in more women of practicing having good 3 balanced meals per day, sometimes 4. We can add snacks if needed, but 3 well-balanced meals per day. Fiber, I said this is crucial, gut health, but also fiber helps bind on to fat and excess hormones that need to be broken down in the body, and it carries it out through our bowel movement. So this is super cool. So the liver does a bunch of things, but it also detoxes or gets rid of old hormones, and estrogen is one of those. So this is how our body, quote, balances hormones. If we have an imbalance of hormones, if we think about it as a production line. If I have an imbalance of hormones, if I have a hormone in excess, I'm either making too much of it or the hormone is not being broken down in a sufficient time. So you have that buildup, right? And the same, if I'm low in something, I'm either not producing it enough or I am getting rid of it too fast. Those are kind of like the options, right? So fiber comes in because fiber comes in and helps bind onto old hormones that the liver is trying to detoxify and get out of the body by binding onto it, binding onto those old hormones. Our liver secretes bile into the gut to help break down fats, but that's also a method of detoxing. And fiber binds onto those bile acids and pulls that waste that it's trying to get out of the body out through our bowel movements. If we don't have enough fiber in the diet, the bile acids or things the liver is trying to detox and get out of our body just gets reabsorbed. So that can happen multiple times. The body just keeps that cycle going. But if we have enough fiber, we can kind of pull those things out of our body. So fiber is incredibly important to hormone balance. It's also really important for appetite regulation. I've probably talked a lot about this in previous episodes or certainly on YouTube videos, but fiber is so helpful for our blood sugar balance and managing our appetite because it slows the absorption of carbohydrates into our bloodstream. So even if we have like a high carb meal, some dessert or pasta or something like that, if I have something that's could be like an appetizer salad or some vegetables, something like that, hopefully paired with protein as well, but that's going to slow the absorption of carbohydrates into my bloodstream. And that's also going to create a lot more satiety after the meal as well. So super important for that. Calcium, magnesium, supporting our bones, supporting our sleep, our mood, other things like that. Again, this is when I'm usually looking at chronometer, like, are we filling up all of those micronutrient needs as well? One thing that also changes a little bit, still important, but iron levels. So iron levels are a good thing to check periodically anyway, but with this life stage, we're stopping menstruation. So we still need iron, but usually we don't need quite as much because we're not having that blood loss every single month. But still important because the absorption of iron as we get older can sometimes be affected as well. B12 is another one to check in on simply because fatigue is a big part of this picture, and having low B12 levels can definitely play a role in that lower energy. So making sure those levels are sufficient is very important to addressing symptoms of fatigue. Omega-3s are something that I usually pay attention to as well, simply because not a lot of people are incorporating them. And these can be things also you can learn about omega-3s on the Chronometer app. Any of those nutrients that it shows, it will also tell you where to get more of them from. So if you're wondering like, oh, maybe I need a fish oil supplement, well, maybe you can just have some omega-3 rich foods and the app will tell you exactly what those foods are. But this could be oily fish is a good one, sardines, salmon are really good sources, chia seeds, flax seeds, ground flax seeds, that's important. But these things are very anti-inflammatory. And like I said, not a lot of people are having enough of these. So really good idea to have these in your diet. And I kind of consider them a food supplement. So I just make sure that I add them to my diet on a regular basis. And then I don't feel as strong of a need to have them in a supplement form. All right, let's talk about weight loss a little bit because quite often people feel like they can't lose weight at this stage of life. And I think one of the biggest messages I want to send with this is that you absolutely can. Number one, you need to get a real handle or picture of what you are eating. I see this over and over again. People say, I don't eat enough. That's why I'm not losing weight, but they're not tracking their food. You need to track your food to see exactly how much you are eating. You need to use a food scale to weigh out exactly how much you are eating, and then you will get a much more accurate picture on what you're actually consuming. I don't want to be measuring in cups, teaspoons, tablespoons, estimating. Unless you've used a food scale for a long time, I don't honestly trust your judgment as far as like how much that is. I know that sounds harsh. I'm not trying to offend anybody, but I say this from a personal standpoint of like, I didn't know how much I was eating until I used a food scale and until I tracked my food and was incredibly honest. And this is a good thing because if you are eating 1,000 calories a day and not losing weight, that's a hard position to be on. That's a hard position to be in. Now, if you think that you're under eating and you track your food and you use a food scale and it turns out you're eating 2,000 calories a day, more than that, or maybe even 14, 16, whatever calories, but it's more than you probably thought, that's a good thing. That makes this process so much more simple. That's a good thing. We just want to be honest with ourselves so we can really take the best course of action. So track your food, use a food scale, get as much information as you possibly can, then we can make the best educated next step. Another way to think about this, because a lot of times I see a lot of opposition when it comes to using a food scale, and I get it. It sounds like a big pain in the butt, but it's literally like a small scale. It costs like maybe $10 off Amazon. and it just lives on your counter. It's not a big appliance. It's not a hassle. And if you think like, well, I'll just keep my food simple and eat healthy and I won't need to track my food, I won't need to, it's just not an accurate thing. If you're, this is equivalent to like looking at your bank statements and you're like, well, I have less transactions. So I'm probably saving money. But you don't actually look at how much, you don't actually look at how much each transaction was. You have no information. Yes, I made less transactions. Cool. I ate more simple food. That might be low calorie. It might not, but it's whole food, so it's healthy. That's essentially like looking at your bank statements and just seeing like, oh, well, I made less purchases, so I probably saved money. Meanwhile, you just made a couple very expensive transactions. So you need the information, you need the whole picture, and then we can make really good suggestions from there. So once you have that information, I am usually looking to take about 15% of that off. So if you say you are having X amount of calories, just subtract 15%. And let's start with that as your quote calorie deficit. I also want to make sure that my protein is up. So that's the first macro that I'm going to find. So those are my priorities. I want a good amount of protein, so at least 30 to 40 grams of protein every meal. So that's at least 90 to 120 grams of protein per day. That's a great place to start, especially if you aren't eating a lot of protein right now. That'll be pretty filling. Let's start there. If you find that your appetite is still really high, we can absolutely increase that, but that's a good place to start. And then I wouldn't worry too much about the other macronutrients as far as how many carbs I should be consuming, how many fats I should be consuming. Start there. And I would keep the carbohydrate sources fairly low glycemic, meaning they're mostly low carb options like vegetables, some fruits, berries, especially. I would moderate the pasta, the breads, and things like that, and focus on whole foods first. If I was going to have some starchy carbohydrates, I would try to make sure that I'm having those things during the day and during times of activity. So before a workout, after a workout, I would try not to have too many starchy carbohydrates at nighttime, simply because my body is a little less sensitive to carbs at that point. So if I have a big pasta bowl right at dinner time, right before bed, my opportunities for my body to utilize that glucose in the most optimal way are limited. Yes, I could go for a walk after a meal. That is a fantastic, fantastic habit to have, but it's just not as optimal. And I think as we get older, we have to probably pay attention to our blood sugar a little bit more. So walking after meals is great, but trying to have those starchier carbohydrates, if we choose to enjoy those, probably at lunchtime would be the best time. I want to add one word of caution here for cutting calories too low too quickly, because like I said, our muscle mass is our metabolic organ. If you take an extreme cut in calories, you are more likely to cut or lose. Your body will pull from muscle mass. So it is a bit of a fine balance to not have your calories too low. I would tend to not want to go below 1,300 calories, too much under 1,300 calories. Depends on the person, and it really depends on where their calorie intake is when they first come in or first start off. But I would much rather we keep calories moderate or not enter a calorie deficit right away. And we really work hard in the gym and add some resistance training in. That would be more beneficial if we can gain some muscle. You're also going to feel stronger. You're likely going to have more energy. And this is usually a more successful approach than necessarily jumping right into a calorie deficit, especially if your diet is not the most nutritious. I would really focus on a generally healthy diet, one that gives you good energy, good nutrition, good amount of protein. It fuels your new level of activity, which hopefully incorporates resistance training, right? And then once we feel really good and stable there, honestly, for like 3 to 6 months, then I would take a calorie deficit more seriously or consider it. But hopefully your calorie intake is probably increased by then because hopefully we've added muscle mass. Our appetite might have gone up a little bit. Hopefully our weight stabilized. Maybe you lost some inches. Then I would consider going into a calorie deficit from there. Kind of depends on how underfed and underfueled that person is when they first enter that, but weight loss would not be my first initial step if someone comes in not eating a ton. If you have any other questions about this topic or another nutrition topic that you want covered, please feel free to email me, Allie@parksidenutrition.com, and I would love to cover that for you. But otherwise, make sure you are following along, leave a comment, leave a review of the podcast, and make sure you are subscribed at parksidenutrition.com/subscribe to the Free Shit Friday email list. All right, that's what I got for you today. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you on the next one.